Okay, hello everyone. I'm Greg Keenan from SAP, and we have a great panel discussion for you right now. One piece of admin as I see people joining here. If you have any questions for our panelists, please use the chat window in the Pathable site as opposed to the Zoom site. That way we can consolidate everything into one place. The Pathable site should be the site that you logged in through. And with that, I'd like to welcome Kamal Alawalia, who will be introducing our guests and moderating our panel today. Kamal is president of Eightfold AI and brings extensive experience in creating software categories, scaling businesses, and making sure that customer and partner success really drives business success. And he's also the co-author of the book, What's Next for You? The Eightfold Path to Transforming the Way We Hire and Manage Talent. So Kamal, take it away.
Thank you, Greg. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm really delighted to actually host this panel. And as he was mentioning the book, What's Next for You? I think in our wildest dreams, we didn't think it would be what happened in 2020 as the next thing for us. So I think besides finding the cure for COVID and counting votes, being an HR leader is the toughest job these days. So I'm actually delighted to have three luminaries on the panel today. So just a quick thing about Eightfold. We are an AI company. We have built a single platform for all of talent. And we are actually solving across the board for hiring, retention, developing talent, D&I, all of it. And towards that end, we've actually been fortunate that over the last 3 years, we're already in about 4 continents, 30 countries, 25 languages with users in 110 countries. So we are hearing a lot and we're doing a lot to help everyone and all the companies as we focus more and more on our employees. So I think the title is very appropriate, Build, Buy, and Redeploy Talent in the AI Era. So I'll pause here and get into the panel and introduce our experts to you all. And I will be monitoring the chat as well. So as questions come to your mind, please feel free to actually type those in. I'll keep watching and surfacing those to our experts as well. So with that, Devin, let's start with you. For everyone, Devin is Managing VP for Talent Acquisition and Development at Capital One. I think one of the iconic modern brands in financial services. Devin, tell us a little bit about your background and what your responsibilities are, and also what has transpired at COVID and how you're managing that.
Yeah, thank you. And good morning, everyone. Today, as Kamal mentioned, currently lead our talent acquisition organization, learning and development, and talent and performance management. Been with Capital One for to be 20 years this coming year, and wow. A variety of roles, including, interestingly, a lot of my experience was outside of the HR space, and previously in our technology organization, and got to participate in and help lead a large part of our transformation. What's been really exciting, for us is, I would say, as a company, while we've transformed tremendously from a technology perspective, we've also been heavily investing in HR technology, and that's proved to be, to your question, just a huge enabler for us heading into COVID, both the ability to operate at scale in a virtual environment, the resources to support the development of our existing associates, and then in the talent acquisition space to continue to attract and interview and interact with candidates through COVID. So excited to talk more, but I think that the technology stack in the HR space has been a huge enabler for us on many dimensions.
Excellent. Excellent. Steve, welcome to the panel, and glad you made it through all the logistics. So you're principal for workforce transformation at Deloitte, and tell us a little bit about your background and what your responsibilities are at Deloitte.
Sure, Kamal. Very happy to be here. So everyone, Steve Hatfield. So I lead our efforts at Deloitte around future of work. We began to see the trend lines in the future of work through our human capital trends report back in around 2012, 2017. They asked me to take on the role globally in 2018. My background is a bit, I would say, unique. I've got a background in business and anthropology. And so I liken myself as a bit of a corporate anthropologist. I've been practicing in the realm of strategy and innovation and people issues my whole career, largely looking at, by and large, what technology does to transform jobs.
That's fascinating. Actually, both of your backgrounds are, I think, an increasing trend, because this diverse foundation really helps bring a new perspective on this. Ashutosh Madeshia, better known as Maddie by all of us, welcome to the panel. Tell us about your background.
Thank you, Kamal. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, good evening, where you are. Responsible for operations and strategy at Eightfold. And one of the areas where I spend a lot of time thinking how do we use our technology at Eightfold to solve our customers' biggest challenges. And financial services has been an interesting area because this industry is in a lot of flux, and their impact on workforce and how to think about future and the future of work has been a very interesting topic of debate and discussion and investigation for us. So we spent a lot of time thinking through that. I came from LinkedIn, joined Eightfold 2 years ago. I ran parts of the operations of talent solution business and worked at Bain & Company previously. So we're excited to be here and talking with all of you.
Excellent. So folks, I have a couple of questions. Feel free to even ask or challenge each other as well. And it's interesting looking at the panel here. We're all sitting at home, some of us in fighter jets. So in light of remote work, which I think even after Cure will probably devolve into hybrid work environments. So Devin, how is your talent acquisition strategy and talent development strategy evolving?
Yeah, great question. So on the development side, as I mentioned, I think we were really aided by the investments we've made in the ability to deliver a lot of our learning and development solutions at scale. And then, for us, I think it's been a lot of rethinking around, what is if you think about the varied experiences that we offer through learning and development, what makes sense to kind of continue as is in a virtual environment? Where can we augment things? And so it's been, I think, a lot of things that previously many companies thought was not possible, or companies particularly that were not set up for a remote footprint have, rethought and challenged conventional wisdom and had to adapt. I would say also a lot of focus around deploying, given uncharted territory, right? What are best practices and what are helpful tools for leaders, and depending on the types of roles and teams, has really varied. On the talent acquisition side, I would say the biggest changer has been the switch to virtual interviewing for our candidates, and I think in particular we've had to focus on how do you showcase your culture and or unique experiences that candidates don't necessarily get in a virtual world.
Excellent. Steve, what are you hearing from your clients?
Well, it's very interesting, Kamal. I mean, the certain sectors and certain parts of the marketplace are sort of moving at pace, if you will, around these dimensions. The TMT companies, as we all know, have put forward very assertively, remote working policies that say, it will be another year or longer. And I think there are others that are sort of in a bit of a wait and see mode. And unfortunately, with the resurgences and sort of the information, though positive about the vaccine, given the challenges of the logistics around vaccinating, it's going to be a bit longer before we're actually able to get back into the office. And so this remote work, hybrid work experience, working from anywhere is starting to become much more the norm. And it's at first, I think there was just this surprise, this demonstration effect that for most companies, especially in financial services, it worked, right? If you had tried to talk to executives in the months prior to COVID, that more and more of the work that was done in their shop could be virtualized, you would have gotten sort of a quizzical look. And yet then it happened and we surprised ourselves. And so given the time frame it's going to take for us to get back to what is this next normal, I think a lot of different behaviors and mindset will shift around what happens. Devin just raised a few of them. And so I think more and more what we will see is changes to how we have fundamentally think about learning and development, talent acquisition, broadly workforce management, given this massive virtual environment.
So you're at Deloitte, and consultants generally do end up being on the road a fair bit. How are your client interactions evolving in that time, in this environment, actually?
It was such an abrupt change. So as a global leader, I was on the road in a massive way. And for the couple of years prior, I was doing some pretty heavy global travel, as you would imagine. My very last trip was actually to London, came back on March 1, and we went into lockdown, as you know, about a week later. And so I've been remote ever since, as everyone else. And I live in a beautiful rural area. I live in the Berkshires in Massachusetts. And so, it's sort of unusual that I am in this kind of remote environment, but it's working very well. So as long as you have good connectivity and everyone's kind of accustomed to operating in what the demands are of that environment, assuming you can put in some, call it empowerment / wellness / boundaries, which is hard. And it's a classic issue that we're experiencing across the patch. But if you can bring some of that to life, I find this works very well.
Excellent. Maddie, any thoughts?
Just to build on what Steve said, there's the notion of something that can be done virtually has changed. And I think the biggest impact it would have it has closed the distribution gap between opportunity and talent. That has been a big challenge for us. Even if we take example of US, all the opportunities were on the coast, a lot of talent was in Midwest, and there has been a long-standing debate. And what it does, it requires companies to rethink the concept of talent pool, or we call talent network. Because now your talent pool, if you're hiring in US, your talent pool is not just US. The entire global talent pool is your talent pool. And one of the things that we have seen our existing customers, once we build the talent network, they do 40 to 60% of their hires from the talent network, which is the amalgamation of every single individual they've ever engaged, past candidates, past applicants, current applicants, and so on. And we expect that number to go up significantly just because these boundaries have gone away. Same for employees. I was at Bain and I was beneficiary of moving across different countries and offices, and that has gone away. Now, if there's an employee, let's say in London, and there's an exciting opportunity in New York, it doesn't require someone to go on a transfer or relocation. They just work from London. So it just opens up opportunity for employees. It widens the aperture for talent acquisition team and how they think about the talent pool and opportunities.
Building off of that, I think there's three themes I would pull out. I think one, for a lot of employees or people, right? I think this has had them, as I've spoken with candidates and are reflective on what matters and priorities, and probably a rethinking of things that hasn't occurred for many people. Maddie, to your point, many companies have seized the moment to move away from their traditional footprint to expand their talent search, across the entire country, which I think has done two things. One is it's opened up significantly more opportunities for those in the market, but at the same time, in certain geographies, I think companies had retention advantages, and now they're losing those retention advantages in a much more with a much more distributed set of opportunities. And then lastly, I would say that I think some companies, right, are making declarative longer term shifts on their workforce strategy, and others, probably, more in a wait and see, and view some return to normal when, who knows, to Steve's point, but also I think that it'll be interesting to see what returns to normal and what do we continue forward with in terms of the lessons learned from how we can actually operate today. And I do think it'll be very different than what it was pre-COVID.
So focusing on financial services, to some extent, the large ones like Capital One and others, you're actually on one side very diversified, and even your talent needs are very diversified. So give us some color on what's unique about talent needs in a bank like yours.
Yeah, and for us, it's been, we've been on a very aggressive technology transformation and journey and with a move to the cloud. And what that's done for us is, I think, the types of skills that we need to both operate in with the modern technology stack that we have, and just the scale, I think, are pretty significant. So if you think about software engineering, product management, data science, machine learning, and AI, right? We have an insatiable demand for talent, as do many of our competitors. And it's also interesting in that I would say the talent that if you look at the talent that we are competing with for, right? We both are looking, not only within talent, within financial services, but as much from technology companies and others. And so it's really interesting to think about, for all companies, say, who are your actual competitors for talent, and who are you competing with for talent, and what is your unique value proposition? And then I think in financial services, I think, with many firms investing deeply in technology, I think it's a surprising, attractive place to grow your career in technology when you get a deeper understanding of, how we invest in technology, the opportunities, and kind of where we are in the journey. I think there's still some perceptions for financial services in general about where financial services is versus the reality of not just Capital One, but many of our competitors, and where we are in the maturity of our transformations.
Excellent. Steve, what do you think? What's the spectrum that you see with financial services? Because you have a fairly broad purview regarding what kind of people are they looking for, what kind of capabilities are they looking to develop?
Yeah, I would say that with the advent of an increasing tech savviness, broadly speaking, across the workforce, and with this growing appreciation for the fact that technology does certain things that technology is good at, and we need to focus on humans doing the things that humans are good at. And how do we marry that collaboration of humans and technology? And Devin already raised it. Sort of, you're seeing a lot of that with the AI and machine learning, and like how do we bring that together in the right way? It means that I think that financial services companies are opening the aperture a bit further in terms of what they're looking for. So part of it is clearly moving into competing with those that are looking for folks that have strong tech skills. But also on the other end, it's those skills that are much more uniquely human. The complex systems thinking, hypothesis-driven problem solving, analytical thinking, judgment, soft skills, right? Elevating the human experience and the empathy that's required around the customer. And so what I'm seeing is financial services organizations start to look further afield, if you will, in terms of the kinds of backgrounds that in the past they may not have been looking at as seriously. And given that, the opportunity to find talent in other pockets that you might not have been looking for. And then suddenly, and that trend line was already happening pre-COVID. Now we're in a remote working environment, one where most people want a hybrid work experience, where it's possible to source your talent anywhere, back to Maddie's earlier point. And you're watching the tech companies kind of become more aggressive about those strategies. And I think others will certainly follow, not just because the competition in the war for talent, but because the opportunities that exist given the kinds of talent you're trying to find.
Very interesting. What do you think, Maddie?
Just to add here, we study the workforce transformation shifts in many different industries at Eightfold, and we are learning from billion-plus profiles of individuals across the world on what the workforce, where the workforce is trending, and we find financial services the most unique industry in that aspect. If you look at the industry today, 30 to 60% of the current workforce might be disrupted because of digitization or fintech-led disruption. So the roles may not be relevant in the next decade. Now, at the same time, banks do need, or the financial services companies do need to accelerate the digitization. Now, this trend itself is not unique. Many companies are facing this. What's unique about financial services is the pace and the scale of change. And the pandemic has accelerated all of that. And so if you take example of HSBC, 80% plus of their services consumption is digital today. If you look at across the world, there's a 40-50% increase in the digital consumption of services, which was already quite high. And it's reaching a point where companies really need to reinvent and figure out, we were on a path of digital transformation. How do we accelerate? And that has a very interesting implications on the kind of talent they can acquire, because the reality is it's not that the talent is out there. And so what do you do with your existing workforce? Like a classic example we looked at very recently, underwriters. A lot of that work will be automated. What can they do? Can they become data scientists? Can they become security analysts? Can they be part of managing online businesses? And so there's a lot of interesting questions the companies will need to answer in a fairly short amount of time.
So I do hear words like flexibility, resilience, agility, which are fine and all makes sense, especially the year that we have had. Steve, you're the professor of future of work. What should financial services companies be developing in terms of skills and capabilities? Because although there is this talk of future proof, I think that's a big word. There is no way to future proof anything because it's moving so fast. So we don't know what we're proofing against. But what should the companies be developing, especially in financial services, so that they can actually ride and thrive in the years ahead?
It's a great question, Kamal. I think this trend line is already in motion as well, but I think that we need to start thinking about skills different than capabilities, and different also than knowledge. And organizations need to develop, if you will, the ability to help their workforce generate knowledge and acquire skills and focus on the development of capabilities. And the difference there is, knowledge, of course, is something that you gather quickly through, Google searches or whatever it might be. Skills, of course, is something that, GitHub says the half-life of a technical skill is 18 months. The half-life of a business skill is 2 to 5 years. So things that are more transient, my ability to do PowerPoint, for example, is a nice skill. But I do less and less and less of it, as an example, right? But capabilities, back to the things that will endure, and the focus on those, that's what offers, back to your word earlier, resiliency in an organization. So then to Maddie's point, if you have more and more of your workforce with strength of capabilities that you can use and redeploy across all sorts of different customer missions, then you can quickly upskill on whatever the particular tech need or the particular project need or the knowledge set around that project to enable that capable person of then moving forward against what it is you're trying to get done. And what was interesting is we saw a lot of this pop again during the pandemic. The frontline workforces that, for example, were not being necessarily used because the branches were closed in financial services. The back office and middle office that were surging thanks to some of the needs around PPP program and the rest, redeploying from the front to the back in order to handle that. And understanding the capabilities of your workforce, shall we say, beyond just the bullets in their job description, became really critical. And so my prediction is that that'll be more and more the trend line because of that dynamic, fluid dimension of how we will organize against meeting those customer missions. And you're already seeing the banks start to focus on, call it what we think of as those capabilities, but they're something that you have to put more effort into helping your workforce acquire.
Yeah. Steve, other thing that would be interesting to see how the skills and capabilities are defined in the context of the industry. If I take data science as a financial services company, I need a lot of them, but are they same as the data scientists at Google? Answer is no. Now the building blocks might be same, but they do need to understand fixed income. They do need to understand capital markets. And how do you create the blend of these capabilities will be an interesting challenge for companies, financial services companies. So I think that's other aspect. Other thing is, there's a lot of talk about digital talent, but when you're operating a business where 90% of service consumption is online, you need different set of capabilities to manage the business. And so how do you think about that? So I think these are some skills and capabilities, how they would evolve very rapidly in the companies.
Devin, you have an interesting brand about what's in your wallet. And I mean, you go down DC to Virginia, it's like Capital One state, basically. What are you developing?
Yeah, I mean, I think Steve it really was spot on in what we, in the how we think about it. Meaning, if I think about on the talent attraction side, where we're focused, so there's three things that really would stand out. One is, the diversity and increasing representation in our workforce. Two is, I would say a strong focus on growth mindset and learning agility. To Steve's point, a lot of the, I think at time our hiring managers can myopically be focused on a specific skill or an immediate need. And a lot of what at scale and strategically what we're focused on is we really want associates who can grow with the organization. And because it's not just about the immediate skill they bring in, it's about their ability to learn and grow with tech as different areas evolve. And so we put a lot of focus on that in our selection process and our mindset around recruiting, and really trying to tease out like what is teachable. And I think what most companies will find is way more is teachable than you realize, and that there's a lot of other factors that are important to assess in your selection process. And then within the company, we've just made massive investments in L&D across the board, ranging from our tech college, which is focused on keeping our engineering organization up to speed and really industry leading in our investments there, in terms of from all aspects of technology, but also upskilling and reskilling. So as we have, and there's a huge, if you look at associate satisfaction, growth and development is a huge factor in retaining associates, satisfaction. And so, for us, it's a multi-pronged approach, but I completely agree with the framework that Steve laid out of how to think about it, and focusing way more on what is teachable and coachable, or what you can develop, versus at times I think companies over-index on the specific skill that's needed at the time.
Excellent. So shifting to your actual transformation journey, how has your HR tech stack evolved over the last 18 months?
Yeah, great question. Significantly. So if you look at the entire life cycle from a talent acquisition perspective, we're in the process of transforming. So it starts with if you think about our talent brand, and our recruiting, facing sites, really transforming them to authentically tell our story, allow associates to connect and engage and more deeply understand Capital One and our culture. In the sourcing space, we're in the process, as of implementing Eightfold, and it's been a huge enabler for us both in the ability to source talent, event management, but also it's just a massively improved experience for our recruiters and how they will interact with the system. And one of the challenges for many recruiting organizations is the proliferation of systems and the number of systems that recruiters have to bounce in between. And actually, it's not because you're hosting the panel, but because of what we're seeing, which is that the user interface and the interactability of your solutions really are game changing for our recruiters and hiring managers. And then there's certain tools for the scale we operate at that we're not able to procure, and so we're building in-house. So we've built in-house a holistic interview management system, right? So the ability to understand everyone in Capital One, who's calibrated to interview, what are they calibrated to interview on, automating the entire scheduling. If you think about, we're interacting in a given year with 150,000 candidates, and so the ability to automate that, to have a more seamless experience, speed, the ability to, from kind of initial interaction to interview. And then because we're digitizing all of that along with all of our interview data capture, there's just tremendous insights we're going to be able to unlock to understand when we have candidates come in, do those candidates have a diverse interview panel? Do we have diverse candidate slates? How do certain interviewers, or scoring people, where do we need to do a better job of, coaching or improving candidate experience? And so, by investing in everything across the board, we'll be in a position where we're just able to, one, have a significantly improved candidate and recruiter experience, but two, the insights and data ecosystem that we're building out, I believe will play huge dividends to be able to answer a number of questions around our talent strategy.
Excellent. Steve, what are you seeing? How is the HR tech stack evolving?
It's a great question, Kamal. I shout out to Devin and what he just said. The metrics that you're going to be able to have to support sort of driving sort of a better diversity sort of metrics and broader goals for yourself. That's fantastic. And we're seeing more and more of things of that sort. So there's the two things that came to mind as you asked the question. One was more and more organizations are starting to recognize that we need to have better and better data sets to govern our workforce and the strategies around that. And so data sets such as the diverse candidates, how are they coming through? How are they being interviewed? Are they experiencing diversity in the workplace as they're going through the interview process to create that experience? Those are great examples of the governing data sets that organizations are looking for more and more of. It became really paramount when COVID hit and everybody became virtual. Do we have the data sets to understand kind of workforce sentiment? And how do I use those to manage this dramatically virtual and hybrid workforce? The other thing we're seeing too is the study produced some information about how AI is coming to the table. And so interestingly, in the pre-COVID, I would call it era, there was this massive dialogue about robots taking our jobs and the robot apocalypse, right? Well, our data set discovered that about 60% of those surveyed are using AI toolkits to augment their workforce. Only about 12% are using it to substitute their workforce. But interestingly, about 5% are using it to manage their workforce. And that's where we start to get to things like what Eightfold AI is bringing to the table and or what we're seeing around the tech stack. How do I bring AI toolkits to the table to understand what workforce skills and capabilities I have? How do I use those toolkits? You're seeing it right now in the provider institutions to schedule. So we can schedule people accordingly on the front line, making sure that we have the right mix of skills, right mix of capabilities, people have had the right level of break. And all of that massive Tetris game as we're dealing with the pandemic. And I predict that we're going to be seeing more and more of tech stacks evolving in that way to enable things like different teams understanding what's happening in terms of what other teams are doing and getting behavioral nudges that they ought to go spend time, one team talking to another. Where we talk about innovation as being a serendipitous interaction, and we want to be back in the workplace for that serendipity. Well, if the knowledge management system is in place and the AI toolkits can do that kind of searching and nudging, why do you need to rely on serendipity? So that's like what I think is the direction of travel we're going to see more and more of.
Love it. Maddie, you've done a lot of work on outcomes and sort of translating the promise of AI to actually outcomes delivered. So share some of what you're seeing across the board.
Absolutely. Steve, Serendipity is still a great movie, though. I think one of the biggest impact that AI has had on the human capital management is ability to understand people in terms of their skills and learnability. And it's no longer looking at the rear view mirror and looking at what people have done in the past so we can draw some conclusion, but using data to predict what people are capable of doing. And what it has done, if I just reflect on a number of engagements we have had, it really has enabled three things. One is just understanding the roles and skills, how the roles and skills are changing in the workforce. And AI is able to mine the large data sets and identify patterns. And it's a very important question. The businesses are changing, and that has implications on the capabilities that need to support them. And so if I take an example of credit risk manager, a very high demand role in the pandemic environment, the role is gaining prevalence, the role is becoming important, but the skills have fundamentally changed in the last 10 years. The 10 years ago, there was a lot more focus on analytics and process. If you look at the role today, a lot more focus on the technical skills and quantitative skills. And so how do you understand roles and skills changing? That's one aspect. The second aspect is capability-based workforce planning. We talk about redeploy, upskilling, reskilling. How do you do that based on people's learnability, what Devin mentioned, and just understanding what people can learn? Because Steve, we get some great stats, like still half-lives are changing for skills. And one of the things that we have seen, the biggest challenge organizations have is what people are capable of doing, and even more so, what people in other functions are capable of doing. So we have seen the redeployments go up. Our customers have seen 50, 60% higher redeployment levels because of this ability to understand individual. And what's even more interesting is 20 to 30% increase in cross-functional mobility, because that's the true power of AI. Because now, if I'm marketing function, I can understand people in finance, people in operations, people in customer services, what they are capable of doing in marketing function. And that's what AI unlocks for the organizations.
So would your AI be able to predict what somebody with an anthropology background be able to do?
If there are large data sets pattern, we can analyze and we can always predict.
Devin, a couple of months ago, we had a good discussion around how do people learn and what inspires them to actually continue to learn, right? That growth mindset, learnability, all of you are talking about that. What are some of the best practices that have been effective for you over the last 20 years?
For me personally, I think a few things. I think one was, I think how much passive learning occurs, meaning, while I've been with Capital One for the majority of my career, I've moved frequently through different jobs, different divisions, different leaders, and that wasn't all purposeful, but in hindsight, right, it is one of the best ways to learn. And then also, I would say in the spirit of passive learning, right, I think I've noticed there's kind of two different ways. Along the course of my journey, I've benefited from mentors or subject matter experts who've really leaned into, develop, coach, and support. And then as I've gotten more senior, I've realized that learning through observation, right? So I've had some incredible leaders I've gotten to work with. I wouldn't say they're the best coaches or mentors, or they're going to sit down and but I learned learning through observation. And so I would say that's been a really kind of helpful thing of, who are role models that I want to look at to kind of observe their behaviors and patterns. Two is another thing I would say is kind of really taking advantage of the resources. I think most, I'll speak, I'm more familiar with Capital One. I think this is probably globally true, is that there's just a tremendous amount of resources available, right, in many of these many large companies today, between the internal universities they have, the access to different types of content, how easy information is available, and are you really maximizing kind of the learning resources available. And then lastly, I would share, probably a mindset around getting more comfortable with, your ability to take constructive feedback and action it. And what I mean by that is I think most human beings love positive feedback, right? And right, or maybe I'm abnormal, right? When I get constructive feedback, I'm disappointed in myself. It can be hurtful. Sometimes I don't. But I think really getting more comfortable with what is your cycle time to ingest the feedback, move through your change curve, and then decide how you want to action it. I would say at times we can end up dwelling in our development opportunities versus really carting a purposeful path forward. And putting our energy into the things that we control, and acknowledging, look, some of my development areas have been the same for 20 years. And so I think also at times it is, I would say, minimizing my development opportunities, but more putting energy into what are my strengths or superpowers and how do I continue to grow them. And lastly, I'll share, less is more. I'm always amazed when people bring me their development plan and it's got 500 different action items. And I'm like, why don't we pick two things to really focus on. So I think those are some of the things that have really worked, for me in my career.
That's amazing. Steve, how do people learn best? How do we drive the learnability as the virtue in our workforce?
So I think it's at work, right? I think work is the greatest source of sort of value in an organization, and the work that you're doing and the excitement and passion you have around that is how you learn. And you're learning in the team, on the job, to Devin's point, the growth mindset, right? Exploring and discovering and figuring things out and creating that new product, that new offering, that new workforce experience, whatever it might be. And so, it's interesting that workforce is in many respects the greatest untapped asset of an organization, and work is the greatest motivator. And so, and learning is going to become, Devin already made the point, sort of the critical attractor. People will come to you to learn. They will come to you to experience something in the workplace. They will come to you to feel motivated around the work that's happening, the impact they're having. And that, if you can tap into that and create something really virtuous there where people are learning, they're creating knowledge, you're capturing that knowledge, they're very engaged in the impact they're having, then that's going to be very, very powerful. And those are the organizations that will succeed.
Wonderful. Maddie?
I think the other thing I would add, and I think Stevie mentioned, people will come to learn, people come for the experience. One of the key aspect of unlocking that is the digital self-serve. Like, how do you empower employees to take charge of their career, charge of their learning? The big part of the other big aspect here, the reason passive learning has been so immense and massive or disproportionately higher to more classroom learning, because it's always linked to an outcome. It's linked to doing the current job well. And one of the big trends that we are seeing now is connecting learning with career growth and mobility. Like, it's no longer good to say that, hey, here are the 5 courses that you should take because these are aligned with our company priorities. You ask people to learn in the context of their own career growth and development. And the big contribution of AI here is the personalization, because all of us are unique. Our experiences, our skills are unique, and how we learn is also unique. I may be the person who loves learning through projects, but there could be others who love learning through courses. And so how do you tailor? It's not possible for the human resource function to cater to these individual needs, but the technology and especially AI can create those personalized learning experiences tied to career growth and mobility. And that's a very powerful way to execute on this, delivering the experience and learning to individuals.
So folks, I'm getting the nudge as we are almost on time. So really thank you to all of you, and hope that as you look in each of your wallets, you do find a Capital One card. So, but I've learned a lot just in the 30 minutes, right? Because I think your framework around knowledge, skills, and capabilities is meaningful, because I think that's the key to D&I also. Mm-hmm. Because that's the ability for us to hire for potential with confidence, because we do recognize all the right building blocks that yes, people are talented, and if they are putting their mind to it, opportunities are absolutely there, both in our ability to detect talent and their ability to grow into one. So thank you very much. Really appreciate your time, and I hope our viewers also enjoyed listening to all of you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kamal.
Take care.